S4, welcome back to the library for the next entry in our Shape the Story mini-series. When we last left off, Daragon Stone Shaper, Dwarven Investigator, and his half-gnome, half-analar apprentice, Resh-lenk, were hunting for the killers of an elven merchant in the old city of Polaron. Their investigation has ground down due to the many lines of business the victim was involved in, with a sizable portion of them being less than legal. Further slowing matters was the need for Daragon to heal after the pair were attacked during the opening days of their investigation, which has left the silver-bearded dwarf bedbound for weeks. A mercenary gang, known as the Buzzblades, had been hired to attack them while they visited the home of the victim, and in the battle, Daragon had been thrown off the edge of a skydock, landing with a crash into a transport that was thankfully empty. While Resh-lenk, along with Conson, a Teltechian associate of their host in the old city, Runescale, the ancient Dwarven forge master who lived in the old city longer than any could remember, had continued to run down leads and gather information as the old dwarf healed and went over what they had gathered. Weeks have now passed and the trail has gone cold. Even with Daragon back on his feet, if only just, they have a daunting task ahead of them as they continue to comb centuries of records and reports, looking for any clue that will shed light as to the identity of the killer or the motive for the killing. Resh was faced with a choice while stepping out for air, an offer for information that could lead to the recovery of Daragon's relic axe, which was lost during his fall in the battle and is one of the last relics the old dwarf has of his clan. To accept would require him to leave without telling the rest. Daragon was out meeting some sources of his own at the time. In the time it would take to cross Runescale's massive home to inform Conson and the Forge Master he would not be able to make the meeting in time. You were asked what Resh should do, and decide you did. Prospective patrons, regular visitors, and new guests of the library, I am the recorder. And before we continue with today's tale, allow me to ask you to like, share, and double check that you are subscribed to Gryphon's Library so you can always have ready access to entries as they release. If you wish to further support the library and the realms, join us at Gryphon'sLibrary.locals.com for early access to entries days before their regular release, as well as content that you will find nowhere else. Other means of support are detailed in the channel's description page. Thank you for your consideration and your support of the realms, no matter what form it takes. Now, on to the tale, and your choice. Continuing from the Shape the Story playlist. Resh set the message, and the tube containing it, down on the table in the center of the landing. With a long glance down the hall beyond the open door into the estate, Resh grinned and tossed a small rubber ball from his belt into it with a fair bit of force. It would no doubt make a bit of clatter and get someone's attention and draw them to the note. With that done, he dove off the landing, deploying his grappling lines to sling and swing himself towards his meeting. As he moved along the passages and along the edge of the sky lanes, swinging and latching onto edges and outcrops of statues and various signage, Resh felt like he was back in the troupe, performing for crowds again. He had had little opportunity to do anything like this in years, and the old city, with its vast verticality, was the perfect place to do so, while also being an extremely efficient way to get from one place to another. With only a few minutes to spare, Resh found himself approaching an elvish restaurant. It was a small place, with a handful of tables at most, likely some family business. As Resh turned and went to enter, he was seized from behind and thrown bodily into the open container compartment of a passing transport, the door snapping shut as soon as Resh impacted on the padded wall opposite it. After slowly standing, Resh could feel that they were in motion, and it felt like they were climbing. There was a chair and a side table, a bar, and very little else to be seen in the compartment as Resh looked around for a moment. Forgive the rough treatment, but one can never be too safe in my position. A voice from the end of the compartment spoke as the bust of a man, human by the look of it, appeared in a burst of light. The man inclined his head towards the bar that could now be clearly seen as the compartment was fully lit by a soft set of lights. Help yourself. There are med packs in there if you need them. Hopefully not, of course. I did tell them to consider your stature, but summoned workers can be a bit daft. Resh made his way to the bar, rubbing his back where a hard container pouch he hadn't realized he was wearing had left what was sure to be a healthy bruise. He poured himself a glass of water, and then sat in a large chair opposite where his host was patiently waiting. I am pleased you chose to listen to my proposal. It is not overly complex or overly nefarious. The merchandise that was stolen from my event, which includes a pre-rained Dwarven axe that I understand you have an interest in, is not for the most part my concern. That the culprits are found and dealt with is. Beyond that, the rest is yours to deal with as you see fit as payment. Simple as can be. I'm not a killer for hire. Resh let his offense clearly show at the very idea. Of course not. Should you, however, come to a name and a location where such services would be best directed, a Trebcom tube appeared on the side table. You would be able to leave such matters to my other associates. Just send off the information. I'm sure I don't have to impress upon you how important it is to be accurate in this. We wouldn't want any accidents. Resh took the tube and looked at his host. Of course. So, what can you give me to work from? And what are you not saying? You say the merchandise is not a concern. For the most part. Cut the dance. What are you looking for? And what is its recovery really worth to you? The bust smiled thinly and nodded after a moment of thought. Fair enough. There is only one item, technically not even merchandise, that is of priority. It was at the auction house to be picked up along with our cut of the sales that night. It's some magical artifact known as the New Claw's Satchel. Supposed to be cursed or some such nonsense. All our tests have shown no meta-energies, but I have a client willing to pay an amount that makes its recovery well worth the effort. Find the satchel, find the thieves, and deal with them. The rest is yours, along with a platinum plaque. All the information on the theft is in the bag behind your chair, along with a secondary Trebcom tube to inform me when you have the satchel. Good hunting. Resh stood and lifted the bag, finding folders, infotomes, and data stones inside, as the image and bust faded and the compartment door opened but a crack. The sound of air whistling lowered as the craft came to a stop, and the door opened fully for Resh to hop out. He found himself on a wide, open expanse in some sort of park, with no cubes above him. The top of the old city. Resh found a seat, and before he could reach back to grab the pouch that had bruised him on entering the transport, it leapt off his belt. Contorting in the air into its humanoid form, one of Conson's psi form landed on the arm of the bench, and looked at Resh for a moment, and then looked around cautiously before speaking. "We must tell the others. We cannot allow a new class satchel to go unrecovered." "I intended to, but what is it?" Resh was glad that he had overlooked the small psi-form's presence on his belt before he had left for the meeting, but he was sure this was the first time it had ever actually spoken to him. It merely shook his head and placed a finger to its mouth in response, then pointed to the incoming form of Conson's sky car in the distance. After Conson landed, and as Resh approached the door, it opened to a very loud and very annoyed dwarf rushing out. "By my beard, what in the world made you think this was a good idea?" Daragon stared hard at Resh before smiling. "Get in, we'll talk on the way back." As they did, and Conson secured the door, he took off. It was clear that Resh had messed up and would have to answer for it. His little rubber ball had broken several ornaments that RuneScale was less than pleased about. Besides that, Daragon was at a loss of why Resh would go without backup. The small form of the psi form sitting on Resh's shoulder was clearly insulted by this, but said nothing. Resh handed over the bag and spoke. "Simple. That auction was not being run by low-end gangs or the like. There was organization, and thus force behind them. Just the kind of folks we need to get information from. And if we can get an in to them, as well as recover your axe, all the better. Besides, we get to keep everything else except the new claw satchel." The Sky shuddered for just a second as Conson spun around to look at Resh. "Excuse me?" "That is the one item they want returned, and they're paying a platinum plaque for it too." Resh looked back and sighed. "So, what is it, and why am I not going to see that plaque?" Conson, having set the autopilot, thought for a long moment before responding, glancing at the innocently whistling psi form on Resh's shoulder. "A mistranslation and a lingual corruption first of all, but one left uncorrected for reasons. For one, it's not a satchel. It's a backpack." He took in a long, slow breath. "And it's not new claws. It's nuclear." His head began to slowly move back and forth, as if he could not believe he was in this situation. A nuclear backpack, or backpack nuke, is a weapon of devastating potential, no bigger, than a backpack. Easily capable of bringing down the whole of the old city, even if it's on the lower end of yield. There's no way we can let something like that remain in the wild. If we find it, we need to give it to the proper authorities. "Like Master RuneScale?" Resh's attempt at levity would have normally earned at least a snort from Daragon, but the old dwarf was seemingly enthralled at the various information in the bag. A moment later, his head popped up, with a wide smile on his face. "That's it? It's the crates." Daragon was smiling more widely now. "And yes, Master RuneScale having a nuclear weapon is a fine idea, if you're looking to anger a thousands-of-year-old half-dragon, half-dwarven forge master. But also yes, we should find this backpack nuke, and it must go to those that can keep such a thing safe." Resh held his hands up in surrender, I knew it was too good to be true, but what about the crates, Daragon? They're the key. Everything that gets moved in the old city internal shipping system has to use crates of proper features and sizes. There are every variant of size and shape you can imagine for all kinds of uses, but they have to have certain features so the system can move them, recognize them, and other matters. All these crates are made in the old city, and our dead elf was involved with each of the few certified producers of such crates at differing levels of control and influence. We knew he had his fingers in quite a few of them. Resh was completely lost at where Daragon was going with this. Not a few. All. And it seems he'd make off-the-book runs so that orgs like this one could move their stuff. Daragon showed some images of the crates of stolen merchandise. The images all but proved his words, with labels clearly identifying them as certified shipping containers. Okay, that is not my guess. Seems kind of small compared to a Nuki. It's just Nuke, Resh, Conson said, grinning. More interesting is that we can likely account for all of these in the elf's records as well, now that we have these information references to work from. If we could actually get a hold of a few of these crates, we could see how they are faking the certs, as well as what they are smuggling in the cores of the panels. Daragon held up an infotome showing the scene of the battle that happened during the auction theft. The staff were all dead or hiding under or behind whatever they could as two forces battled. One of them was recognizable, unmistakably the Buzzblades, while the other was not, only seen as shadows and clouds of darkness and smoke darting about. In the foreground of the particular image, a crate lid lay sliced in half on the ground. It looked like it was bleeding, with a dark and viscous fluid seeping out of the exposed cavity in the panel. Daragon pointed at it with a finger. Not quite sure how yet, but my bones tell me that goo is at the center of this. Well done, Resh. He smiled broadly. But you still have to deal with RuneScale when we get back. A few hours later, and with Resh finally finishing the repair and cleaning work created by his actions, everyone gathered to assess what was now known. As they reviewed and dissected the various points that each thought relevant or important, it became clear that there still wasn't a clear motive behind the killing, beyond perhaps the strange goo that was apparently being smuggled in the panels of these off-the-book crates. As they reviewed what information Resh had obtained in his meeting, the presence of the Buzzblades was considered by all to be worrying. They were a widely used gang for many of the underworld, but the old city was huge, and this was a hell of a coincidence. However, the group of small shadow and smoke figures were far more interest to RuneScale. Not only had they been able to fight off the Buzzblades while taking all the loot, they had done so with no losses due to the Buzzblades and the fight with them. The only death was when one of the forms ignited into flames after trying to take up Daragon's axe from its case. The other shadows left him to burn as they secured the axe carefully and made their escape. RuneScale stood and went to pour himself another ale, stating that he was getting too old to solve riddles of shade and fire, but this one was plain enough to reason out. Daragon looked up confused as Resh spoke. "The doors, boss. Tell me that this is not a Dwarven tunnel charge." Resh replayed a section of recording as one of the shadows ran down a Buzzblade with a methodical, if rapid, charge. RuneScale was smiling, nodding. And what kind of dwarf would burn at the touch of your ancient relic axe, Daragon? No, Daragon said. No, even if I thought you were right. No. RuneScale's face turned hard as stone for a moment before a soft, knowing look softened it. Daragon, you've known for a while, haven't you? Daragon stood and turned, looking the ancient dwarf in the eye. Only since today's revelations, but I had a gut feeling they were here. I can't do it, RuneScale, so don't ask it of me. Liar. No, worse. Coward. Do what exactly? Resh was lost. Your mentor is the sole remaining dwarf pledged to a task, the righting of an ancient wrong, the redemption of his clan. Daragon was never out of the focus of RuneScale's stare. I am no match for a member of the Lost Clan. Daragon's temper began to show for but a moment, before he slowly exhaled and continued. It does, however, explain why the elf had this in a hearth vault. Daragon pulled out at what first seemed to be a small notebook, but pressing a spot on its spine, it grew to a great-sized tome, almost as large as Daragon himself. The Lex Primus of the Lost Clan, of my clan. Within it are the secrets of runecraft, the names of every member of the clan, past and present, and so much more. Must have been a form of insurance on the elf's behalf, which solidly points to them as a threat he was aware of. Too bad non-dwarves can't read it, RuneScale was smiling widely. However, you can. One of the 4 lost artifacts of your clan, secreted away before they were betrayed and corrupted, scattered across Jam'mar and left in hidden places, or sent to ancient allies by the few to escape the damnation of your clan. Didn't the High Seer say that when all 4 were reunited, they would forge the path of atonement in the hands of the last champion? That is a legend, and even if I believed it, this is but one of the 4. Wisdom's Insight, Warden's Wall, and the clan's ancestral Forge Hammer are still lost, with the Forge Hammer said to be broken. Daragon shook his head mournfully. Alzur and the Mad saw it reduced to naught but an exhibit unviewed and a tool most simple in his final recorded vision regarding them. RuneScale's smile didn't waver a bit. If they were here, would you take the mantle? Would you become the last champion of the Stone Clans, sworn and empowered to forge Atonement's path? Long, heavy moments of thought left Daragon's features set in a resigned, yet defiant arrangement. I would. Why the sudden change of heart? RuneScale's tone was cautiously triumphant. 2 reasons. 1, they are most likely behind the murder of the elf, presumably to secure this smuggling method, if not the goo within, whatever it is. Either way, it appears as if I'm going to have to deal with them, as that is what I am being paid for. So yes, I would. Were the rest of the artifacts here, of course. Very well. Locate the nest of these vermin, and I'll make the preparations. Daragon could have bored through star metal with the glare he fixed on RuneScale, even as the old dwarf continued. I've had the wall and the forge hammer's head for ages, and the insight has been in your possession most of your life. He pointed at Daragon's artificial eye, as Daragon's face betrayed his shock. The fact that it accepted you was all I needed to know all the way back then as to your destiny. The other two have been in my private collection and museum, waiting for the time, out of sight and out of notice. Daragon touched the shell of his artificial eye and understood the truth of the Forge Master's words, but a question remained to him. That's the exhibit unviewed, but what of the tool most simple? If you have not uncovered that plain and simple truth by the time you've located the vampire's lair, I'll tell you. Oh, and what is your second reason? RuneScale's smile was warm with pride, while mischief in his eyes grew. They have a nuclear weapon. RuneScale's smile vanished, and the mischief bled from his eyes. To be continued. If you'd like to contribute to the further exploration and explanation of the realms, please consider leaving a comment, a like, and sharing the video around. I read all the comments and make efforts to reply to each. Thank you for helping to grow the channel, and know I look forward to each and every one of your comments. Other methods of support can be found in the channel's description. Thank you for watching.